I Hi everybody, it's Mary Lynn Harris. I'm the podcast host for Create an Impact for Hard at Work, and I today have a very special guest treat actually because she's another like-minded gal and all about kindness. What can we do more about kindness in the workplace? Kindness everywhere, right? Right, Linda? So
Exactly.
I'm going to let Linda introduce herself, and she's going to tell us the first question I always like to know is, how did you get started doing what you're doing? So, Linda, I'd love to hear your story.
Well, first of all, thank you, Mary Lynn. I mean, I've been aware of your work now for quite a while, and we realize now this is kind of our first time getting a chance to have a conversation. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um, at least one-on-one. How did I get into, how did I get into this work? I feel like I kind of got called into it.
Hmm.
I had a long time relationship with my father, and when I found out he was dying of lung cancer, I knew we needed to do some healing before it was too late.
Hmm.
And I lived on the West Coast. He was on the East Coast. And we spent the last 8 months of his life really engaged in making sure we made peace in our relationship. And
Right.
after he passed away, I took on a personal project to move through the grief. And I performed 1,000 mitzvahs in his
Mhm.
memory. And the mitzvahs is a Jewish word for good deed.
Right.
And that was a blog I was keeping. And that consequently rolled into this idea to write my first book.
Hmm.
1,000 mitzvahs, how small acts of kindness can heal, inspire, and change your life. And that's kind of what put me into the work around kindness.
Hmm.
And I started speaking a lot to churches and houses of worship and other schools and such like that. And then eventually realized I wanted to take this to a corporate audience. And
Hmm.
this message resonates for kindness personally and professionally. And so
Right.
the last 10 years I've been really working in corporations around kindness in the workplace.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So have you, as you were saying, talking about, it's very similar kind of journey we both had. So tell me a little bit more about what kind of, what was the best kindness act that you felt that was most impactful to you besides working with your father?
I mean, that's such a good question that I haven't thought about in a while. There were a couple,
Mhm.
and actually, it's timely that you're asking me that this week because so none of the mitzvahs in that project were prescribed. They were all
Yeah.
just sort of simple things I would wake up in the morning. At the time, I was a full-time stay-at-home mom. So
Hmm.
a lot of them revolved around my children or the school or things that just happened at the grocery store. But I remember I had a colleague and a friend who said, for your 1,000th mitzvah, you got to do something kind of bigger, maybe
Right.
plan something. And my dad taught me how to cook.
Hmm.
I remember him making cream of wheat for me in Vermont on those cold, winter evenings. And so I wanted to do a food drive
Hmm.
at a local food bank here in Portland. And somebody wrote it up in our local newspaper about this project I had taken on. And there ended up being like 2,000 pounds of food that got delivered for that
Wow.
final. And the woman who ran that food bank, she passed away this week. And I
Oh.
found out about it after the funeral had happened, and I felt really badly that I hadn't been able to go to attend the funeral. So
Hmm.
I would still like to tuck a card out in the mail to her family and let her know that she meant a lot to me, helping me
Right.
be part of my own mitzvah project. So
Right, right. Yeah, that's incredible. It's always amazing how many little things people can do that make such a big, big difference in somebody else's life, right? And
totally,
the cool thing about when you give, you get more back. So,
totally, totally. I love that. Yeah. And
yeah,
I don't think you realize that unless you're actually focusing on it.
yeah.
I sometimes feel like people think, I remember thinking this when I would volunteer in different
Mhm.
school projects or whatever. Oh, I'm giving my time. And secretly, I knew how much I was receiving in those
Yeah,
years,
right.
all the opportunities of little connections with people. So,
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because since I've been doing the podcast, I met so many wonderful people that are doing some aspects about kindness and how it incorporated in their workplace or just mostly personally.
yeah.
I guess one of the interesting stories is that Microsoft was one of the perks is that the people that work there can have a volunteer day and
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't
they
know
will
Microsoft did
pay
that.
they
Yeah.
will pay them to do that
Yeah.
for taking off a day off and doing that. So I just thought, wow, that's incredible
Yeah.
that a company would think that much of their employees that they'll allow them to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually remember when I first learned that myself, and I was really impressed with companies that did, some do
Yeah.
more than a day.
Yeah.
Some give you up to 20, 25 hours to be able to volunteer and then they match that time for you. So
Right. Right.
I think that's important.
Yeah, I think this guy's situation, it worked out to be that he actually was able to create a job with Microsoft, just,
Awesome.
doing that type of thing and promoting it. And so I think for him, it was a kind of a blessing in
Yeah.
disguise,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I
Yeah.
love that. Don't you think there's always, I like to think about silver linings that come even in difficult situations. I
Hmm.
mean, I feel like there have been so many of those in my life that I definitely believe it's real. So,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, that's because you're in this space and you're a giver and you just want everybody's lives to be better, right?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah. So tell me a little bit more about the work that you're doing in companies. Are you just speaking? Are you doing workshops or how
Yeah.
did that come about?
I started as a keynote speaker
Mhm.
and, primarily after my first book came out, I recorded a TED Talk and I was part of Toastmasters. So I already knew that I loved speaking and joined the National Speakers Association and realized you could be a speaking professional. I didn't really even know that that existed. And I joke because my dad used to tell me I had verbal diarrhea. And I thought that if you only told me there was the profession of speakers, that would have saved a lot of time in my career path.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a lot of keynoting at the beginning of my work and work on I love being at a conference. I love meeting
Mhm.
professional association attendees. But in the last few years, I've really created bigger programs that are more about a kindness initiative in my corporate clients,
Mhm.
culture. I work a
Right.
lot in senior living. I love that I
Yeah.
love that industry. I feel like they do so much, and sometimes they need some help as well. Maybe team members aren't so kind to each other.
Right.
Maybe team members aren't so kind to themselves. So
Right.
helping elevate that. And then, of course, what they can expect from their leaders.
Right.
So I begin to build some bigger workshops. I have kindness essentials and kindness intensive. And I'm actually launching this fall my first emerging leadership program.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
for leaders in kindness. And I think of an emerging leader as someone who's maybe newly managing someone or is a younger person, but really sees themselves growing into a leader capacity, or even somebody who's been out of the workforce for a while and wants to go back into a professional career. And maybe things have shifted since you
Yeah.
were in the workforce.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
Cool.
yeah.
So what is your program going to be about?
Yeah, I'm really excited. We're going to talk about confidence and we're going to talk
Mhm.
about adaptability and recognition and self-care and boundaries and goal setting. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a 6-week course and I'm kind of at the tail end of doing the marketing right now and I'm really excited that we'll get a cohort, a good cohort. I want it to be small and
Right.
intimate though, because I think that there's a lot that can happen when you share with
Right.
a smaller group. So
Right. And how many people is a smaller group?
I want to have 10 people in the cohort.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah. Um,
Okay.
yeah. And I think it'll be really, it's, you put something out there and I'm sure this is true for you. You put something out there, you have no idea
Right.
how it's going to work out. Some things are great. And this just felt like it was my next opportunity to help even emerging leaders lead with
Right.
kindness.
Right. For sure. Yeah, I
So
think at any level, whether you're top level or bottom level, you can
yeah.
certainly use some help. Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Well, I'm sure
sure.
you think about that too. Like I began to tell people it didn't matter what your title was. You could be a kindness catalyst at any level in an organization.
Right.
Because
Right.
I think you and I have probably both seen people who've been anywhere in the organization could impact the culture if they get something big enough that's
Right. Right.
received.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. My experience is that mostly it's the employees that wanted a program
yeah.
and the companies just said, oh, that's foolishness, or we're not doing that. And I tell the story all the time, but I just laugh about it. But there was one large company. I had to laugh about them because they recently came up in the news saying that uh, about they're willing to pay for people's opinions, but they weren't willing to listen to their employees about having a kindness program. And and I said to the employees, well, what you could do is just start in your small little, group works and just start thinking
Mhm.
about what kind deeds you can help each other with or
Right.
yourself and stuff.
Right.
Start there. And so it was sometime later they approached me and they said, okay, we'll buy a kindness program, but we're not implementing it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, why would you do that? well, then
Right.
we can say we have a program. I said, no, you don't.
Yeah.
It's just like,
You have something on the shelf that isn't being initiated or activated. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, when we take all these courses, we have these tapes and books all on the shelf. We probably
Yeah.
never looked at them or read them, but we bought them just to
Right.
say, oh, yeah, I have that book.
Right.
No, no, well, I'm sorry. It's just if you're not really going to implement it, what's the point?
Right.
You
Don't
know,
bother.
kind of thing.
No.
I know I'm not selling you anything unless you're going to implement it. It's
Yeah.
the
Yeah, for
bottom
sure.
rule. How
And
come
I'm sure,
you
and I'm sure
say
like
that?
when you even have a company that hasn't implemented a kindness program, but you meet the leaders who have a vision of what the organization can be and they're leading with kindness,
Yeah,
you have people in the organization who will tell you all the stories of the ways they've been treated or the things that the company has done, and it will really amplify what is possible within that organization.
right,
So
right. Yeah. I
yeah,
think it's just the challenge, I guess. It's always trying to think, okay, if that's your problem, how can we get over that so that you will implement it?
for
What would
sure.
it take? You
Well, you know what I started doing recently? Maybe you did something like this too. I started putting up an elephant on a slide, the big
Mm-hmm.
elephant in the room, and then
Yeah,
I created a little slide with all the articles that have come out because when you and I started this
yeah,
work, there really probably wasn't as much research about how important kindness was because
right.
people call it a soft skill, it's a weakness as a leader. And I think in the last few years, I've seen that leaders who lead with authenticity and transparency and
Mhm.
kindness, they are the kinds of leaders that people want to work for.
Right.
They draw people into their organization. So my little elephant slide has pictures of all the articles from the Harvard Business Review and Forbes magazine and all these good, you know,
Yeah,
periodicals that talk about how kindness is in the workplace. And I just quickly go through. There's been, dozens of articles written. So that has given me a little bit more confidence.
yeah,
Already when I started this work, of course,
of
when I
course.
started working with corporate, my three reasons why I knew kindness mattered for me, it was your reputation,
Mm-hmm.
being able to recruit great talent, and being able to retain that talent. I mean,
Right,
I knew immediately like those were the things that would impact your bottom line. And so that
right,
was why I thought it was important. But there's even more reasons now.
right.
Mental health and
Yeah,
and anxiety. There's all sorts of things that could be impacted by your employees depending on the
right.
culture. So
Yeah. It's sort of like, oh, you'd rather have rude people working for you than kind people,
right, right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a great story? I mean, I learned about so many companies that have just been fabulous. I'm sure you have too.
Yeah, I'm sure I would have to go back and look at. Wrote a little book about. I had a collaboration, where people shared their stories about
Yeah.
kindness. And it's always interesting. There's lots of people that will share their stories about kindness they were able to give, but it's really hard to ask somebody to give you a story of what they received. Oh, I don't know any of the stories, but I do know that William, who is the publisher of the Random Acts of Kindness. I don't know if you remember those little booklets,
Yeah. Yeah.
full of stories.
Okay.
And he said he didn't intend on publishing the book, but what happened is that they were publishing a magazine or newsletter or something, and somebody said, "Well, I'd like to do a story about kindness," and he just kind of like, "Well, what's that got to do with anything, right?"
Right.
But
Right.
he
Right.
just knew that there was something there because they have.
Right.
So he said they had a party in their office and they invited everybody and to come up and share their story of kindness, things that they have done for somebody else.
Hmm.
And he recorded it all. So
Awesome.
that's how he ended up with the little book. And
That's
then
awesome.
he said at the same time, okay, let's reverse that. Let's have everybody stand in front of the room and share the kindness deeds that they've received, and nobody would stand up and say too much, or maybe
Right.
it's the other way around. Receiving is always easier, but to tell somebody I did this as a kind deed, we're not
Right.
going to likely brag about it because
Right. Right.
it's not why I did it to brag about
For
myself,
sure. For sure.
right? But
Yeah.
he couldn't even get anybody on that side of the fence to share the
Right.
deed that they thought that was, even in the little things, are so
Yeah.
important, right?
For
But
sure.
we think they have to be big. like the big elephant in the room.
Totally. Oh, I had that same epiphany that if it wasn't when I did my mitzvah project, I was like, does smiling count? Does letting someone in traffic count? All the
Yep,
little things that you would want to do in a more
yep,
civil world. And, of course they're important.
right,
Uh, but you have to decide that it doesn't have to be the grand things. And I actually asked that same question about giving and receiving kindness.
right.
And I find people are willing to give kindness.
Yeah,
You're right, they probably aren't as comfortable sharing what they did give.
yeah,
But when we talk about receiving kindness, many people really struggle to be the receiver of kindness.
yeah, yeah,
And I think that's just because we're really not taught that. We're taught we have to be independent, everything we do is individual. But if you've been through a difficult period in medical
mm,
challenge or, loss of some kind, people are there for you. People
yeah,
want to be there for you. So when you allow them to give, you're really letting them do what they want to do
right.
naturally too.
Yeah,
So um I
yeah,
love
that's,
it's not rocket science, right?
yeah,
It's not rocket science. It's
yeah,
just a reminder
yeah. It's always the little things that make the big difference anyway.
for sure, for
Right.
sure. And actually, I
Okay,
did
big projects are nice, but it's
no,
really about all the little things that you can do for somebody that
totally,
they're unexpected. Of course, I always make sure that if you're doing them, you're doing because you want to do them
of
and
course.
not with some expectation of return. It'd be
Right,
like the employer employee relationship. Okay, I got this kindness program. We're going to practice it, but I'm only going to do it because I want you to get something from you, right? As an
right,
employee.
right.
So that could be a little bit tricky, but I guess as long as you're implementing kindness in the workplace, whatever is just simple little things, then saying good morning to somebody that you probably would never say good morning to,
Right,
you never know. They might
right.
need that good morning, right? Was it
Totally,
hard to say
totally,
that?
totally.
No.
Yeah,
So why don't you say more of it?
right.
Well, well, no, I don't know. So
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of those little things that make a big difference. And I know some other people in this space that would say that's not enough. And this is, you're right, it's not enough, but it's a
it's
good
a
place to
start.
start,
A good
right?
place to start. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
curious if you've ever had anybody, an employee come to you, because I actually had this happen just the last couple of weeks, an employee kind of questioning why we're doing a kindness initiative.
Hmm.
Because again, they're feeling like, well, now it's incentivized and my company wants me to do these things. Aren't we just supposed to do this normally? You know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I think it's sort of you can almost say to them like it's like a gamified,
yeah,
when you have
exactly.
if you post something you get a badge,
Yeah.
and it's not really meant to be. I guess that was somebody said on a forum board that I read that they didn't like to gamify anything because they're not social, they're not doing this, they're not doing that, but they're actually finding it a lot of fun.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
even if you look at it as just the initiative is to bring more fun in the workplace, more
Totally.
fun in your life, more fun in
Totally.
somebody else's life, wouldn't you
Right.
do it?
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Well, so far I have a kindness bingo, but I think I'm going to think of other. I mean, I do try to gamify my
yeah,
my programs so that we're
yeah,
doing something fun at every program. Years ago, I did an art project basically. I brought a pile of art supplies and I had them make a kindness slogan and a kindness song and they presented to each other. It was relevant to their organization, but they were always really fun. I remember
yeah,
a nursing group doing their singing and they did a little dance at the same time. They were proud to present their
yeah.
song. So
Yeah, great ideas because people want to be kinder at work, but I think a lot of people are just stuck in,
yeah,
okay, what is kindness and
right,
why if my boss wants me to do this, why?
right, right.
And maybe the
Oh,
why is like, well, why would you be kind to somebody? Maybe you have to ask yourself that,
right, right.
why do you
Also, I mean, we spend a lot of time at our workplaces. So wouldn't
yeah.
you like to have a place you love to work at? And
Mm,
I often remind people, it's a choice that one of your employees is staying at your workplace. They
yeah,
don't have to stay there. So if you treat them terribly, like you want, I always love when people say it feels like a second family. I
Yeah,
love my place of work. I feel like people see me. I feel like I belong. And I think that's what kindness is helping to do. It's
right.
raising this awareness that everybody belongs. It doesn't matter, where we come from, what language we speak, what we look like.
Yeah,
We're all the same
yeah.
underneath, or whatever. So,
Yeah, it's really about, like you're saying, like kindness brings is the like the glue that
yeah,
sticks everybody together, right?
totally.
So if
Totally.
we have more kindness, whether it's simple little things, and then
Totally.
you graduate to little higher things, like kind of
Ah,
what you're doing for your merging program, is
yeah,
helping them to be better leaders, but lead with
right,
kindness
right.
rather than whatever agenda they have behind them. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
that's so cool, so cool.
Yeah.
So
And I don't know, like you, I feel like more people are talking about this now.
oh
I mean,
yeah, for
I feel
sure.
like there's an awareness that maybe we aren't such a kind society and what can we do? And more people are trying to join the conversation for elevating this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Before I kind of got out of the kindness business for a while, and then I was thinking about that's just why I've asked a few people in the workplace, is, like, do you think we still need kindness? Or are we good?
Oh, no, no,
Oh, we
no.
need it now more than ever. And I said, why?
Yes.
Well, people
Yeah.
just aren't friendly to each other anymore. They're mean, they're bullies. And I said, oh my God, we're still at the school ground, kind of
Oh.
things. It's amazing.
I
But
know, we'll put ourselves out of work at some point if we get to the point where the universe is the way I envision,
yeah,
So, I mean, in my second book, I remember like writing, what do I hope a future with the
yeah,
kindness could be? And it was really thinking about the little kids, a little maybe kindergartner, and I have no
yeah,
idea what kindergarten is like anymore, but it just
yeah,
in my fantasy, it's like the kids hug each other.
yeah.
They clap for each other, they're just excited to be with each other and they're sort of living in this joyful way.
Hmm.
Um, and we need to provide that for children, for teenagers, for adults. I'm reminding people right now, I've been thinking about it because my kids are out of the house and I don't have anybody starting school this year, but
Yeah.
the school buses have just started in my neighborhood. And so I've been thinking a lot about this transition between summer and fall.
Hmm.
And, if you've got people in the workplace, and I don't know how long it's going to be till you air this podcast, could be weeks from now. So, um,
Yeah.
but when we're starting at the transition in summer from summer and fall, then it's this idea of there's a lot going on for your employees back at home,
Hmm.
bigger than maybe what's happening in the workplace. And it's a good time to, to inquire, how are things going? Maybe you have a child who's struggling at the beginning of the school year, or you have a special
Hmm.
needs kid or whatever, or maybe you're a grandparent raising a child, who knows? So
Yeah.
I think it's just really great when leaders are conscious of times of the year, things that could bring things up. Somebody's lost a child, God forbid. This is going to be a really
Yeah.
hard season for them,
Right.
So all of that is just being more in tune with your employees.
Right. Right. And as you were saying about little kids, I'm thinking most kindergarten kids could be teaching us a few lessons about being kind.
Totally,
Some
totally
reminders.
could. Totally, totally. I don't know
Yeah.
if you saw the People magazine, like a few years ago, People magazine did they did a
Yeah.
kindness
Yeah.
edition, and there was
Yeah.
like an 11-year-old boy in that magazine. I can't remember now everything he
Yeah.
did, but I was just like, this is somebody who is a leader and
Hmm.
can teach so many people about it just at
Yeah.
11 years old.
Yeah. 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 For sure. I think our kids could probably teach us more information about how to be kinder to each other than us adults trying to teach each other.
Totally, totally. Well, I'm excited to be working with emerging leaders because I know I will learn something too, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I'll just have a cohort that I can help learn from, and hopefully we'll all get inspired. So,
Right. That's fantastic. Okay, tell us a little bit more how they can enroll in your emerging leadership program.
well, depending on when this podcast lands,
Oh, probably within next week or so. Yeah.
okay, fine. It's going to start October 1st.
Yeah.
And they could get more information on my website, which is lindacohenconsulting.com.
Okay.
Uh, they could email me, linda@lindacohenconsulting.com. But this first cohort, we're getting pretty close, so it may be filled if they reached out to me. But
Yeah.
if we, I won't say if, when it goes well, my intention is to do this possibly twice a year, this
Right.
emerging leadership cohort, and
Right.
and I do offer it for companies as well. I mean, I
Right.
did
Right.
it. My first iteration was for a company where they enrolled the actual cohort,
Yeah.
and this is the first time I'm doing it where I'm trying to find the
Yeah.
cohort attendees. So
Yeah.
it's been a good learning experience. So
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah,
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. So when the video goes out, we'll have all your contact
that
information
sounds
below and
awesome.
people
Great.
can sign up or find you at some point in time and reach out to you and say, okay, we're ready to have kindness at work.
Awesome. That's awesome. And I did
That'd be
end up
great.
writing a second book, which was called The Economy of Kindness, How Kindness Transforms Your Bottom Line. So
Yeah.
that's also on Amazon. And that for me was the opportunity. Sometimes I only get 45 minutes with an audience if I'm doing a keynote. And I felt like
Yeah.
I wanted to put into the book as many of the tips and tools and
Hmm.
stories that I had heard about kindness in the workplace. So,
Right. Right. Absolutely.
well,
Okay.
I'm so glad
Yeah,
we
well, so
connected.
glad you can come on the show and we can have this great conversation. And I wish you so much success because I know you'll do very well. And I will have all your information below the video when it goes out, and I'll let you know, and I'll send you the preview so you can get it out
Perfect.
if you want to get out. Yeah, it'd be a
Perfect.
lot of fun.
Thank you so much. And I'm so happy we finally got to connect one
Yeah,
on one.
one-on-one, having a great
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Linda. And as always, I always like to say, be kind to each other because that's all we have is each other. Okay, thank you so much. I'll try to stop. Oh, I guess I have to go to end.